Hello, this is Rodney from rodneysblog.net, and today we are going to continue reading in Genesis chapter 15. The Lord's covenant with Abram. After this, the word of the Lord came to Abraham in a vision. Do not be afraid, Abram. I am your shield, your very great reward. But Abram said, Sovereign Lord, what can you give me since I remain childless, and the one who will inherit my estate is Eliezer of Damascus? And Abram said, You have given me no children, so a servant in my household will be my heir. And so that's all straightforward. In verse 4, then the word of the Lord came to him, This man will not be your heir, but a son who is your own flesh and blood will be your heir. He took him outside and says, Look up at the sky and count the stars, if indeed you can count them. Then he said to him, So shall your offspring be. So verse 4 here, this is the promise that God is making. Abraham is requiring a lot of faith because he's an old man and he doesn't have any children. His wife Sarai is old as well. God is telling him, have faith. You're going to have a lot of offspring. It'll be so numerous like the stars. So shall your offspring be. So this requires a lot of faith to believe. Your faith in God, his faith in God is really being tested. Abraham believed the Lord, and he accredited it to him as righteousness. So belief in God's sight, belief is or equals righteousness. If you believe God and you trust God, you are righteous. So it doesn't mean you're perfect. It doesn't mean you're sinless. It doesn't mean that you don't make mistakes. But he's able to overlook your inadequacies if you remain faithful and you believe and you act on your belief of God. So this is before the Mosaic laws came into play. Righteousness was your faith and your belief in God. So that's really an important point right there, because he was considered righteous even before Moses came into being. And verse 7, he also said to him, I am the Lord who brought you out of Ur of the Chaldeans to give you this land and take possession of it. But Abram said, Sovereign Lord, how can I know what I will gain, that I will gain possession of it? So the Lord said to him, Bring me a heifer, a goat and a ram, each 3 years old, along with a dove and a young pigeon. Adam brought all these to him, cut them in two, and arranged them halves opposite each other. The birds, however, he did not cut in half. Then birds of prey came down on the carcasses, but Abram drove them away. As the sun was setting, Abram fell into a deep sleep, and a thick and dreadful darkness came over him. So that just means it got very dark and scary. In verse 13, then the Lord said to him, Know for certain that for 400 years your descendants will be strangers in a country not their own, and they will be enslaved and mistreated there. So God is prophesying about the journey to Egypt, where the Israelites will be enslaved by the Egyptians. So he's saying this is what's going to happen. So a lot of questions come up. Why would God allow that? Why does God allow slavery to happen? God will allow things to happen, and we don't really know why. Our job, we are called to do, is to trust God and to have faith in God, and to know that in the end, He will reward you for your faith and for your trust. And even if it means slavery, no matter what situation God puts to you, you're expected to remain faithful to God, to love God and trust God, and cry out to God. And that's eventually, as we continue reading, you'll see that the Israelites cried out to God and God rescued them. So, yeah, slavery is a tough one. It's in the Bible. And a lot of people don't understand it because because slavery is evil, and it is a harsh reality. If you think that slavery doesn't happen today, it still does. There are people, even in the United States, that are in some version of slavery, either trafficking or being abused or mistreated by employers because they're not from this country and aren't legal, have legal documentation to be here. So they're in a situation where they can be taken advantage of and or basically enslaved. So if you think it still doesn't happen, it's still happening today. It's very prominent. And that's just the nature of humans. I mean, I don't think God has ordained there to be slavery. That's just what humans do. We abuse each other, and we're the sinful ones. It's not God who's the sinful because He's allowing it. He gives us the choice to do the right thing, but He will not stop us from doing the wrong thing either. So to blame God for slavery is like to not take responsibility for our own sinfulness. So anyway, that's enough about slavery. They will be mistreated there. Verse 14, but I will punish the nation they serve as slaves, and afterwards they will come out with great possessions. You, however, will go to your ancestors in peace and be buried at a good old age. In the fourth generation, your descendants will come back here, for the sin of the Amorites has not yet reached its full measure. So remember, the Amorites is kind of just an offshoot or branch of the Canaanites, which were the descendants of Ham. They were in the land of the Canaanites, and the first time Abram got there, God told him that He was going to give him all the land. So the fact that He says that is not reached its full measure is that God will give you a set amount of time to go on with your sinfulness before He takes action. It's time for you to come to your senses and change or repent and stop doing what you're doing. But at some point, the time runs out, and right here it's being called come to its full measure. In verse 17, when the sun had set and darkness had fallen, a smoke and fire pot with a blazing torch appeared and passed between the pieces. So verse 17, what's going on here? The sun set, dark fallen, a smoking fire pot with blazing torch appeared and passed between the pieces. So it's talking about the pieces of the what Abraham had cut up there, and in those days when you made an agreement, many times what they would do is they would call it a covenant, and they would basically turn this off real quick. Basically, what they would do is cut up pieces of meat and offer them as sacrifices to God, and they would walk in between the pieces of meat as a symbol, as if I do not honor my part of the agreement, you're basically calling curses down on yourself. And each of the two parties would do that, just to show how serious they were about the agreement. So right here, God is doing it. God represents the fire pot and the blazing torch, and God is walking through the pieces of meat, saying, "Hey, if I don't do this, if I don't do what I told you I'm going to do, I'll curse myself," because nobody can curse God. He can only curse himself. So, and if you notice, He wasn't requiring Abraham to do the same thing. Abraham had already demonstrated his faith by his belief. On verse 18, on that day the Lord made a covenant with Abram and said, to your descendants I give the land from the Wadi of Egypt to the great river, the Euphrates, and the land of the Kenites, Kenizzites, Cadmonites, Hittites, Perizzites, Raphites, Amorites, Canaanites, Girgashites, and Jebusites. So that's all we have for chapter 15. If you have other questions, please put them in the comments. I'll try to answer them. And God bless you. I hope you have a great day. All right, bye-bye.